it is Lori with Behavior Education at Spirit Keeper Equine Sanctuary, and I am joined tonight by Soji, and I'm going to finally tell you about her and introduce you to her. This is Royals at the Ranch for Thursday, January 20th, 2022, and Soji is a 6-year-old Python Regis who has been here since September 22nd, 2021. And she came from PhD Python. Soji has quite a different story than Fulcrum. For those of you who are familiar with who Fulcrum is, he's the other adult Royal that joined our family. And he came from 5.5 years living in a rack system with plain white paper and a water dish. Now, Soji was obtained from a local reptile expo by the person I got her from when she was just a hatchling. And then she spent her time between the university where he worked, being in an enclosure and being handled by university students on and off. And then when she went home with the professor, she was in a tub. She was exposed to quite a lot of different things. And when she got here at age 6, she pretty much fit right in. She wasn't too worried about too much. And I, of course, put her right into quarantine. And there's a couple of reasons why you haven't seen her until now. Now, she is a female. She has laid at least one clutch that I'm aware of, and she's a cinnamon. When she got here, she had a wheeze, and the person that I got her from told me that she had a wheeze and that he had never had her tested for any type of injury or illness. She'd never been to a veterinarian. After speaking with him for some time and knowing her history, I was pretty certain the wheeze was likely from exercise intolerance or stress and not from disease, but obviously she went straight into quarantine here. And then I got her a vet appointment, and she got a clean bill of health on her physical exam, and then she was tested for nidovirus, and that came back negative. And then our veterinarian, who's an excellent exotic vet, went to a continuing education conference and found out that there is more than one way to test for nido. And she asked if I could bring Soji in to do a second nidovirus test because it was going to be more thorough. And so Soji went back to the vet in November, and she had a second nidovirus test, and that was also negative. And while she was at the vet during that appointment, I had some other snakes there with me who I've been working with for quite some time, and we were practicing their cooperative care behaviors, and I was target training them at the vet. It's a fear-free certified veterinary practice, so they are used to animal trainers being there and practicing these cooperative care behaviors. And when I had the reinforcement out to give these other snakes, which were frozen thawed rats, Soji's interest peaked up, and I thought I would just offer her one and do a pairing of the target at the vet. And she ate the rat at the vet, which tells me she probably wasn't too stressed. When she was in quarantine, she voluntarily came out of her enclosure a couple of times, and I didn't even want her to do that at that time because she was in quarantine, and it isn't something I normally let them do when they're in quarantine, but she did. So she cleared quarantine. She got cleared by the vet at 2 different veterinary visits, and I started letting her have more and more exercise, and that wheeze has gone away. So it was either from stress or exercise intolerance, but she doesn't have the wheeze now. So why such a delay in me introducing you to her? It's just simply been because I haven't ever moved her or her enclosure out of the quarantine room. And she has been in an enclosure that is 4 feet long and 3 feet deep and 2.5 feet high. Just within her enclosure, she's had a lot of space to move around and a lot to do. I always wanted to move her out of that room, either with her enclosure or in a different enclosure. And she made that decision for me last night when she escaped from her enclosure. I was doing my nightly checks, and she wasn't in her enclosure, and I noticed that the sliding door had been pushed up off the track, and she had pushed out of the corner where the sliding glass door opens. And it's not even a sliding glass door, it's an acrylic door. And I've never really liked this enclosure that she's been in. I bought it used off of our local classifieds, and I can't even remember what brand it is. It's one of those that starts with a C or a K, like Cages or Cryptic. But I've just never personally liked the enclosure. I didn't like the quality, I didn't like the design. I loved the size, and it's been a great size for her. But she was able to, she's a pretty beefy, strong girl. She was able to, I guess, push her body against the acrylic enough that it pulled one of the sliding doors up and out of the track, which means that she was then able to push the corner out and get out. So she had a little bit of adventure in that room. There was no place she could escape to, and I ended up finding her underneath a bookshelf, which means I had to empty the entire bookshelf and lift it up to get her out from underneath it. I was pretty sure that's where she was because of her size. There was really only a few limited spaces where she could possibly be. Soji got her name from Star Trek Picard. If any of you watched season 1 of Star Trek Picard, there were 2 characters that were androids, daughters of Data, Daj and Soji, and she's named after Soji. And the reason I picked that name is PhD Pythons called her Emoji, and I was told that she was named Emoji by the students at the university. And so I didn't, no offense to anyone, really like the name Emoji, and I thought Soji was similar enough to her original name that I wasn't completely changing it, and it was from a science fiction program that I really like. She hasn't been handled a whole bunch here. You can see that she's a little bit nervous. She is not wheezing. She's not darting and trying to get away. And when she is out, she does a lot of this coiling and climbing on things as she moves around the room. So this isn't really unusual behavior for her. But she isn't really all that used to us yet because I haven't done that much with her, and it's through no fault of her own. Now that she's out of the quarantine room officially, she's actually in one of my main rooms that has some of the other royals you're used to seeing. I'm sure that you're going to see her more. She is in the room where Ahsoka is, where Barkley is, where Sarek and Feather are. And there's a Morelia Bredley in that room, along with some of my carpet pythons. I guarantee that now that she's in there, she'll be allowed to come out more, and she will be in videos more. However, she's relocated right now to a smaller tub until I put another enclosure together for her. I'm not putting her back into that one she escaped from. I recently moved my Pop 1 Carpet Python moon door from the do-it-yourself tub enclosure that I had converted, and that's a pretty popular video. I can't believe how many people have watched that, into a 4x2x2 black box cages enclosure. I just last night, real quick, put Soji in that because it was clean and it was empty and it was all ready to go for another snake. So it's only about 3 feet long and 18 inches high and about 20 inches deep. So it's not the size she's used to. But until I get another enclosure put together for her, she can come out whenever she wants, and she can exercise on the activity stations and the stands and roam around the room like the other snakes do. I have other enclosures in our storage building ready to be put together. Do I always keep spare enclosures here? Yes, I try to, because I never know when another animal may end up here unexpectedly, or when an enclosure might break, or something like this happens where she got out of that enclosure and now I just don't feel comfortable putting her back in it. So I have another black box enclosure in our storage shed, in our storage building, that's a 4x2x2 ready to be put together. And then I have 4 other enclosures that are boxed up that have just been here as spares that are 4x2x18 inches. And so I'll just pick one of those out and have our intern from Pikes Peak Community College, who started this week, put one of those together for her, and I'll get that set up. And until then, she can stay in the DIY tub that many of you have already seen. It has heat, it has lighting. I think she'll just be fine in there until she can have another bigger enclosure. She's been here about 4 months. I have a few photos and a little bit of footage of her. I just don't have very much because of the wheezing. I really wasn't handling her, getting her out, or doing anything with her until her viral panel came back and she was seen by the vet and she was all cleared. And I have no concerns about that now. So I actually think that I'm going to see if she would like to eat. While Soji is enjoying her meal, and yes, I did start target training her with her very first feeding here, and no, she hasn't had any problems eating here. She has never refused a meal here, and she ate her first few days here, and she's been a fine eater. Both mice and rats, haven't had any problem with that, haven't had any problem with frozen thawed. While she's finishing that, we're gonna move to our behavior break, and this time our behavior break is gonna be a reminder of how I recommend that you try to ensure a smooth transition when you add your new royal to your home by replicating the conditions the breeder was keeping them in as close as possible, while at the same time allowing them the opportunity to have access to novelty and a more complex environment where they can get physical exercise and cognitive stimulation. And I generally do that by setting up a tub for them and then cutting a hole in the tub and putting it in a much larger, much more complex habitat so that they can choose to remain in the tub and never leave it if that's what they feel comfortable with. But if they would like, they can leave the tub and explore the habitat at large. So let's take a look at that with our royal from Canova, and her name is Phoenix. One of the things that I wanted to reiterate in this episode of Royals at the Ranch is how you can place a hatchling snake or a juvenile snake or a new snake of any kind into a large enclosure, maybe their adult enclosure or an intermediate enclosure. This is a 3x2x2 black box cages enclosure that I have Phoenix in, and she was just hatched not too long ago. Let me double check her hatch date. She came from Canova Reptiles, and she was hatched on November 1st. And we're filming this on January 19th, 2022. And you see how I have this full of stuff. And when this door is closed, there's a cave here that she can go into. And I have the outside of the cave covered with some things. So she's inside there, she can still kind of see out, but it's mostly covered. And then on this side of her enclosure, I have moist substrate in her water, and some cork bark and a rock and all kinds of stuff that's okay to get wet and moist. And up here she's got a perch and she's got an elevated sky hide. And then in the middle I've got this net, I've got another cork bark, some material for her to climb on, and she really likes this holy roller that I've got fake vines on. And then you'll notice that over here on this side of the enclosure I actually have a tub set up. And I always try to put the new snakes in a tub because that's generally what they come in from breeders. But I want them to have the opportunity to leave that tub when they want to and have it be their choice. I don't want to force them into a new habitat if it's something that they don't want to be in, but I also don't want to force them to stay in a tub if they're ready for something else. So I know that Phoenix is in here because she's in blue, and she's chosen to be inside the humid hide in her tub while she's going through that shedding process. And I just wanted to show you that. Her tub is fully furnished with a humid hide, a regular hide, a perch, and water. So she never would have to leave that if she didn't want to. But she has chosen to come out of this tub since day one of getting here. Within 12 hours of arrival, she was out of that tub and spending time in her enclosure at large. And the only time I've seen her in this tub since is just now, since she's gone into her first ecdysis cycle here with us. The other thing I wanted to show you about this setup is that during the day, Phoenix has a UVB light bar and it's covered with this protective guard. And then she has a halogen bulb, which is also covered by a guard. And then at night, I turn all of that off. And if she needs any supplemental heat at night that the ambient room temperature isn't providing, she has a heat mat outside of the enclosure wall right here. And so there's a space between her tub and the wall that she can get into if she needs to and get right up against the wall where that heat mat is providing supplemental heat. But we keep the ambient temperature in this room at around 70 to 75 at night. Now this enclosure is near a window, so sometimes it can drop a little lower. And I see on the readout right now the ambient temperature on the cool side of her enclosure is 73 degrees Fahrenheit and the humidity is 68%. me, don't hesitate to reach out via Messenger on Instagram or Facebook, or you can email me at behavioreducationllc@gmail.com, or you can join us on Patreon, where you get 2 live monthly group chats with me and the rest of the patrons, and depending on what tier you sign up for, you have unlimited access to me via telephone, text, email, and messenger, and you get private meetings with me as well.